It ain't the left side or the right side, then it must be the fin side. Inside. It ain't the left side.
Thank you, Solo D. Welcome to another episode of On the Fin Side here with Kat and Paul. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. Check out our merch store on thefinside.threadless.com. This is what we call our slow time of year here in May, where it's between the NFL draft and training camp, that kind of dead period. Paul and I, though, are going to take you position by position through the Miami Dolphins roster, all 90-plus players, and we're starting with the quarterback position, the ever-important one today. It's been an interesting offseason. The Dolphins did sign Ryan Fitzpatrick. They also traded on draft day for Josh Rosen. So we'll go through there and some latest news and how we think that these positions are going to shake up, as well as the roster spots in general. So when it comes to Josh Rosen, the latest news out of OTAs is that Ryan Fitzpatrick came in, looked great. Josh Rosen may have looked a little bit behind, may have looked a little bit more like a second-year player. Does that surprise you at all, Paul?
No, not at all. I mean, it's right. You know, Josh Rosen came in and looked like a second-year player. No kidding. I mean, he's a second-year player, and Fitzpatrick has a reputation of coming in, lighting the world on fire, and looking like an absolute stud for practice, OTAs, and the first couple weeks of the season, where he typically ends up looking like the best player on the planet, and then he looks like the absolute most hot garbage player on the planet for a few weeks after that. So I was thinking about it, when we talked about doing this show, and really, I wouldn't be shocked if the beginning of the year we see Fitzpatrick start, but then we see Rosen take over from him and not relinquish it a few weeks into the season, somewhere in the middle of a game that Fitzpatrick's laying an absolute deuce in the middle of the field.
Yeah, everything here that we see before the start of the year, it has to be a competition. If it's 50-50, like we've talked before, it has to go to Josh Rosen. If it's 40-60 in favor of Fitzpatrick, then I still think it has to be Josh Rosen. But if it's a conclusive Fitzpatrick is more ready, he beat out Josh Rosen, as disappointing as that may be for the fans, then I think Ryan Fitzpatrick has to win that job, because the alternative to that is that you start out your first year in Brian Flores saying that the best players don't play. And I don't think that's the right message to send to the team. So, yeah, we'll see what happens when it comes to the quarterback position there. But I think the more that Rosen gets comfortable, that he's going to end up winning that job. And if not, Fitzpatrick does have that upside to where you just never know what's going to happen with the guy. I mean, keep in mind, the first quarter of the season last year, Ryan Fitzpatrick was the story of the year. The first 3 games of the season, he had 1,230 yards passing. That's not a misquote. 1,230 yards passing and 11 touchdowns through the first 3 games. So he does have that ability to shock and awe the universe.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you're gonna have a few weeks with Fitzpatrick where he's gonna look like Dan Marino, and then you're gonna have a few weeks with him that look like Dan Fogelberg decided he wanted to play football. So it's that's not unexpected with Fitzpatrick by any stretch of the imagination. And yeah, one caveat to the best players will play with Brian Flores is, and this is an expectation I want fans to keep in mind, it may not be the best player on paper at times. Flores is going to play the best player for what he wants to do that week, what his scheme is for that week. Not necessarily the best player on paper, because it may be a player that fits what he wants to do better, even though player A might be a better overall football player, player B is better for the scheme fit that week. So keep that in mind when you're looking at the best player plays.
Yeah, that's true. I think at the quarterback spot, though, it's best to have that continuity. And if Ryan Fitzpatrick at the beginning of the year has that continuity, then that's great. But once Josh Rosen gets in, I don't care if it's week 1, I don't care if it's week 5. I anticipate it being week 1, but once he's in, I really think that the Dolphins have to do themselves the justice of giving him a full 16 games from that point if he starts in week 1.
Yeah, see, I think Rosen's going to end up being the starter, but the more I think about it, I think it's going to be somewhere around the 2-minute warning in week 3 or week 4 that Rosen takes the reins. And I'm okay with that. It gives him a chance to build a little confidence, which he didn't get the opportunity to do in Arizona. And it gives him the chance to come in a situation, and if he can take the team on his back in that situation, it gives him the chance to truly and visibly in front of everybody take the reins at the position, which I'm completely okay with.
Yeah, I mean, if he comes in week 3, week 4, like I said, I'm fine with that. But once he gets in, he stays in. I don't want to see this, putting him in, taking him out, putting him in, taking him out. Because to me, that is what ruins quarterbacks. He needs to live through his mistakes once he gets in. And if he is so bad that you've got to yank him at any point, then I think we have our answer as to whether or not Josh Rosen is the future quarterback of this team. If their own coaching staff is not willing to live through those mistakes. But I think we're getting way ahead of ourselves here. I think that Josh Rosen is going to win that quarterback spot. I think we're in agreement on that. And it does not surprise any of us that he is not the starting quarterback heading into OTAs and didn't look the best in OTAs. Ryan Fitzpatrick is 36 years old and has been around the league for quite a bit. So, just looking at Josh Rosen in general. Go ahead.
Sorry. One more point I just want to make real quick, too, is the way that the Josh Rosen trade makes the most sense, and I know, I've said it. I know we had Greg Likens on the show, and he said the same thing. The Josh Rosen trade makes the most sense, unfortunately or fortunately or what have you, based around the best player plays and blah, blah, blah. It makes the most sense if you play the living hell out of him for the majority of the 16 weeks this season, because like we've pointed out before, if he sucks so bad, yes, the season tanks a little bit. Miami gets that early pick, makes the trade make sense. They don't need to mortgage all those picks they've got next year to move up. They're in position to get their guy if it's clearly not Rosen. But if he doesn't, Miami has a chance to do well. They may not be picking as early in the draft, but they don't have to be, because they don't have to make that move to get their quarterback. So the only way the Rosen trade doesn't make sense is if you don't play him. Then it doesn't make sense, because now you kind of mortgaged a little bit for nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Right.
That's where it makes no sense.
Yeah, you bet. And that's where it would make no sense, because if Josh Rosen plays and he stinks, and now he's on his second team in 2 years, and it just looks to this coaching staff too like he doesn't have it, then you're probably going to win 3 or 4 games. You're going to be picking in the top 5, and you're going to end up taking a quarterback like Tua or like Justin Herbert in that top 5 anyway. And Josh Rosen from that point could be the backup, or maybe they can flip him for a late round pick. But look at on the optimistic side. Say that Josh Rosen does start a quarterback. It starts all 16 games. I'm starting to think, what would be a realistic stat line to where we could say Josh Rosen may be the future of this team? And I came up with some numbers here too, based on somewhere between, the 18th and the 20th best quarterbacks in the game. So to me, what could be realistic is he completes 60% of his passes. He throws for 3,700 yards and throws for 12 touchdowns to 10 to 12 interceptions. If he did that, then at the end of the year, I think the Dolphins do have a decision to make as to whether or not they're going to make Josh Rosen their franchise quarterback going forward and work with him more and more, and then take those 7 draft picks in the first 4 rounds and use them on other positions. But the alternative to that is Rosen comes in, he completely stinks up the place, and they take all of those resources, or at least the first resource, and use that at the quarterback position.
Yeah, and I'm going to throw a couple caveats there. I mean, throwing to Devontae Parker, you're good for 3 or 4 interceptions. Throwing to him, he's an interception creator for opposing teams, and until he proves otherwise. But I mean, if he can get a decent touchdown to interception ratio, my biggest thing, stats aside, stats don't lie, or numbers don't lie, but you can lie with numbers. We all know this. If my eyes tell me that the potential is there, if my eyes tell me that, you improve his offensive line a little bit and get him another weapon at receiver, regardless of what his numbers are, regardless of the win total, my biggest thing is what my eyes telling me watching his footwork, watching where he's placing the ball, whether receivers are catching it or not, or batting it in the air to opposing defenders, Devontae Parker, not to name any names, and things like that. If I see that there, if I see the progress from week 1 or 3 or whenever he takes over the reins through week 17 of the season, if I see that progress out of Rosen where I feel he's the future, I'm okay with it regardless of what his numbers say. I'm okay with it even if it's a 3-win season and that potential is there that he's built upon from week, that we see him grow. I am okay with it, and I'm okay with not taking a quarterback next year, even in the top 5, if we see visibly from Rosen all the intangibles that we need to see. That's the biggest thing for me with him as we move forward here.
Yeah, it gives the Dolphins 2 ways to be successful, because keep in mind, everybody, that Josh Rosen was an underclassman when he came out in the NFL draft 2 years ago. I mean, he'll be 22 years old and 7 months in week 1 of the NFL season. He turned 22 this past February. As a comparison, he is 3 months older than Dwayne Haskins and Daniel Jones. He's 5 months older than Kyler Murray. So we're not talking about a seasoned veteran here. So it's also the possibility that he does well a couple of years down the road. We at least have to see, as you were alluding to, Paul, that potential this year. And then say the Dolphins go 2-14, 3-13, and Rosen does not show much of anything, then the Dolphins at that point you would think would take a quarterback to double down on that position as well as they should. But one thing that I saw about on Josh Rosen on tape, I've watched all of his games from last year with the Arizona Cardinals. I watched a lot of him at UCLA coming out. He has that gunslinger mentality where he wants to complete those 20, 30-yard chunk plays all at one time, which could be a bad thing for him. But one thing I like with how he meshes with this Patriots coaching staff is that if you take a look at what Tom Brady did in New England, Tom Brady would dump the ball off all day if you gave him the opportunity to do that. And I think that's what this coaching staff is going to coach into him, that, hey, a lot of times it's better to take that 5, 6, 7-yard pass than try to gunsling it downfield for 20 or 30 yards.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, is if they can get him to predominantly dump the ball for that 5 to 7 yard chunk play, the good thing there is with the speed and talent that Miami has at the receiver position, at the tight end position, at the running back position, there will be things that, A, those chunk plays open a ton of stuff over the top, and B, the Dolphins' just general team speed at the skill positions is going to open a few of those 30-yard plays even more so. So you look at that, you get the safeties cheating up on those 5 to 7 pump and dumps. And what Miami can do with Jakeem Grant, Albert Wilson, Mike Gesicki, Kenny Stills, Devontae Parker with a question mark, Kenyon Drake, Kalen Ballage, they can get people over the top as well. So that is going to open up the entirety of the field to do the things that Josh likes to do too. And he does throw a pretty deep ball. I don't care what anybody says. He throws a pretty deep ball, and Miami's got the players that can get downfield fast enough that this offensive line should occasionally allow for that to happen. So hopefully we get to see a little bit of that out of him.
So the Dolphins have 3 arms in training camp here. Josh Rosen, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Jake Rudock may add a 4th one along the way somewhere. But Jake Rudock from Michigan was a 6th-round pick back in the 2017 NFL Draft of the Detroit Lions, has thrown 5 NFL passes. He's 3 for 5 for 24 yards and an interception. And if you did not see his one interception, it was a pick 6 by Eric Weddle in Week 13 of the 2017 season. If you haven't seen it, you have to see to believe how bad of a throw it was. There was literally nobody in the picture, almost nobody in the picture on the All-22. But this is somebody who's from the University of Michigan. We wonder how much Steve Ross had a hand in wanting this guy on the Dolphins roster. Paul, do you see the Dolphins rostering 3 quarterbacks, or do you think they're just going to go with Rosen and with Fitzpatrick?
If Miami rosters 3 quarterbacks, it's simply and only and exclusively going to be because somebody else shakes free from another roster that they like. Rudock's in there as a camp body, camp arm, somebody to give Rosen and Fitzpatrick a rest in the second half of preseason games.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. If someone I wanted the Dolphins to draft in the 7th round was Tyree Jackson from Buffalo, very simply because I thought he would be an intriguing arm to have in camp, something a little bit different, someone with high upside. But it would take that type of player shaking loose from another roster for the Dolphins to give some consideration. For our listeners here, we should have in the upcoming episodes a show from a guy named Zach. He put a video out there, a very well documented video out there that has almost 500,000 views on YouTube. The title of it is "Does Josh Rosen Suck?" And it's a great video about what he brings to the table, about the promise that he showed in Arizona last year, as well as some of the things that he needs to improve on. So we're going to work toward getting him on our show. We really look forward to that too. But I do encourage you to go out and watch that video. Does Josh Rosen suck? The answer is probably not. So that's very interesting moving forward here. Josh Rosen versus Ryan Fitzpatrick, that training camp battle. Paul, anything else to add on the quarterback spot?
Not really. I mean, it's definitely going to be a very interesting thing. It's going to have huge impacts for Miami in the coming years, whether it's putting Miami in position to get their quarterback of the future, whether it's, Josh Rosen turning out to be the quarterback of the future. The only thing that's pretty ironclad here is Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to be what Ryan Fitzpatrick is, a journeyman that plays up and down, but at least can be that placeholder for you if need be. That's the only certainty at the quarterback position right now.
Absolutely. And that will do it for our breakdown of the quarterback position as we head into training camp here in a couple of months. You can follow Paul and I on the Fin Side on Facebook, Twitter, Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Spotify, all the major social media outlets. Check out our merch store as well on thefinside.threadless.com. Send us some messages, too, of what you want to see on the show as well as questions that you want to have answered on the show, too. And if it's not on the right side and it's not on the left side, it is on the Fin Side. Solo D, take us home.
It ain't the left side or the right side, and it must be the Fin Side. Inside. It ain't the left side or the right side, and it must be the Fin Side. Listen, Dolphins fans across the land all tuning in to see what Brian Cat and